The passive voice is the voice which is always used by liars. And it is essentially the voice chosen for Mr. Johnson's comments about Harriet Harman's investigation, that no one had told him that what he was doing was wrong. And therefore, he didn't need to revise the statements that he made to Parliament because nobody had told him. Now, of course, like Mr. Putin, he surrounds himself with yes men. But what Harriet Harman's investigation has so far shown is something very simple. She says that it would have been obvious to Boris Johnson at several events he attended that the rules were being broken. She's produced a 24-page document of questions for the Prime Minister, and she's proposing to interview him in public later this month and to determine whether or not he misled Parliament. But this introductory comment, this introductory account is pretty damning. They've established 4 ways in which Mr. Johnson may have misled Parliament. The first is his assurance on December the 8th that no rules or guidance had been broken in number 10, despite the fact that the Metropolitan Police had issued fines and had found that that was not correct. Second, that he had failed, quote, to tell the House about his own knowledge of the gatherings where the rules or guidance had been broken, despite the evidence that he attended them. Again, he relied at the time on the fact that no one had told him. Third, Parliament says that he may have misled, Parliament may have been misled when Johnson told MPs that he relied upon repeated assurances that the rules had not been broken. Now, the committee says that the evidence it has received shows that there was no assurance that any gathering about any gathering's compliance with the guidance that was in place at the time. Indeed, the purported assurances were only about one alleged breach of rules, not more generally about number 10's compliance with the rules and guidance. That's a much harder thing to establish, because Boris Johnson is relying on a negative, and negatives are very hard to prove. Boris Johnson is relying on the fact that he did not receive assurances. Really, a committee an investigative committee, an inquiry can only establish what it did receive. Finally, the committee suggests that the report that Sue Gray has published about where the rules were broken. Mr. Johnson gave the impression that there needed to be an investigation by Gray to establish whether the rules or guidance had been broken before he could answer questions to the House, while repeatedly making the statement to the House that he appears to have had no personal knowledge that he did not reveal. Now, that would imply that he was never at any of these parties, but of course we know, not only from photographs but from the police fine, that he was indeed at some of these parties, and that there was a culture of partying. This was some sort of hedonistic ramble, and quite a lot of specifics have emerged. It is surreal to discover that the committee proposes to rely on evidence culled and orchestrated by Sue Gray, who has just been appointed Chief of Staff to the leader of the Labour Party. Johnson has released a statement expressing concern about Miss Gray. This is particularly concerning given that the committee says it is proposing to rely on findings in the second Permanent Secretary's report as relevant facts which the committee will take into account. And this is where Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries have come in to smudge the waters a little bit. Can you smudge waters? to smudge the painting, to smudge the ink on this particular issue. So on number 4, on the 4th point, I suspect Boris is relying on others to throw up such a fuss that Sue Gray's report is ignored by Harriet Harman. I don't think that's going to happen. And instead, I suspect Harriet Harman is going to focus on whether or not Boris misled Parliament by withholding information or distorting information. So you can't say categorically that nothing has happened when you say you don't know. And that may well be, in the end, the issue that captures Boris. Because Boris was quite strident in saying no rules were broken, and then at the same time was saying he didn't know. You can't have it both ways. And also, of course, our law operates on the principle that ignorance is not a defence. But ignorance is Boris's only defence in this case, because he has to admit that the rules were broken. You can't have it both ways. You can't expect the rest of the country to be told, the ignorance of the law is no defence, when that's what the Prime Minister is basing his entire defence on. It's a sort of topsy-turvy world. And frankly, we want none of it. We're supposed to be led by the elite, not led astray by the elite. And who are the elites anyway? Oh my goodness, why did we even elect them? I think we need to seriously consider whether our democratic process is fit for the 21st century. In these days, is this sort of parliamentary election the way to get the best parliament? If you go to the debates in the House of Commons, short of the PMQs on a Wednesday, the debates are trite and worn and simply rehash things that you can find in any decent academic paper, along with slogans by Suella Braverman and beating the dispatch box and talking about an invasion. So I don't think that a parliament in the 21st century should be the place for sloganising and rehashing somebody else's academic papers. I think a parliament in the 21st century should have proper debate, should be exchanging real ideas and real issues in real time. If you cross the Parliament and you go to a debate in the House of Lords, oddly, although the House of Lords gets a very bad press, you get a really well-informed, articulated and interesting debate where the conclusions reflect the changes in the debate. It's not simply a matter of one side issuing all these slogans and the other side capitulating. There is an exchange of opinions. I haven't heard that for a very long time in the House of Commons. So maybe we've just got the wrong people in the wrong houses. Maybe we need some of the people from the House of Lords in the House of Commons, and we need to put some of the people in the House of Commons into the House of Lords. I'm not for the abolition of the House of Lords, particularly given the fact that it's the one place in Parliament where there is a decent debate. So if we can't improve the quality of debate, the worst thing we can possibly do is to throw out the one place in Parliament where it's taking place relatively well. I think the next question, and the question that Gordon Brown's review doesn't answer and doesn't touch on, is how to improve the Commons. And until we do that, I don't think we should be fiddling around with the House of Lords. And we can't improve the House of Commons while we have people who cannot be bothered to attend it, having been elected, while we have people who cannot think for themselves and simply repeat slogans and jeer and shout at the other side making it almost impossible to hear what's going on. We need to have a better way to select people. And equally, if you want to participate in a parliamentary democracy and put your name forward for selection, basically that's your working life over, because you cannot possibly go around the place campaigning for a seat that almost certainly you're not going to win until you're offered a decent, quote, safe seat. And once you're in Parliament, the business is so intense, it's one thing after another, that you barely have time to look at the issues. Indeed, when people write to you, you probably refer them up to the civil servants who will write the letters back to your constituent, and your constituent will then receive this very strange, legally nuanced reply that tries to evade the question. I've written to my MP, who seems quite a genial man. I've written to my MP about 2 issues, and in both cases, for a number of years, in fact, I just get letters back which are putting things on hold, which are not answering the questions I've asked, which are giving me evasive answers, and therefore I'm forced to write again and say, actually, can you talk to this person, and can you please get this person to answer this particular question? And again, I get a completely vague answer back. We have to get to a point where MPs can be held responsible and can actually do their own work.